We're waiting for the video, guys, so it'll be about another minute.
Can you have Ryan Davis talk?
Ryan, can you talk?
I don't have audio again. Why? They just hit unmute all. Ready to go live. I don't have audio. Go down. More. Ask Bob Seal to come here.
Come down here.
Yes, come in the chambers.
Bob Steele, can you come down to the chambers, please?
Stephanie's still.
She's still unmuted,
She's
right?
unmuted. She's unmuted here.
I can't make you. Does this need to be unmuted? City host? Oh, got it. Can't hear us. What is happening? I don't understand. Now we're back to. I don't know. We can't hear them anymore, and they can't hear us.
You didn't change anything?
No.
Sound PC muted. No. The meeting without us.
Mm-hmm.
Off in the queue, listening to all this. Thank you, guys.
If are we recording? Can somebody tell me at the city? Are we recording audio wise? Can we just do a verbal roll call? Or are we still waiting for? Are we still waiting for video?
Ryan, so we now have audio and everything, and we can go ahead and start soon. Or we can start now.
Let's start now.
Let's start now.
Perfect. So once again, welcome everyone. We'll go ahead and call the May 12th, the regular meeting of the Post Falls Planning and Zoning Commission to order. Can we go ahead and start with roll call, please?
Davis.
Here.
Carrie.
Here.
Whalen.
Here.
Hampy.
Here.
Kimball.
Here.
Stephenson.
Here.
The ultimate question is where is here, but we won't get into that right now. Again, please make sure and silence your cell phones. If you have any pets, please be cautious that they do not attack you on the camera. And we'll go ahead and get started. Any amendments this evening to the agenda, Mr. Manley?
There is none.
Okay, any ceremonies, announcements, appointments, and or other presentations?
None.
All right, seeing none. Commissioners, you've had a chance to review the agenda. Do we have any declaration of conflict this evening?
None.
No. No.
Okay, seeing none, then I would move to the consent calendar. Hopefully everybody had a chance to review. Mr. Manley, do you want to take us through that?
Yeah, there's just one item. It's item A, which is the meeting minutes from March 10th, 2020.
Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion to approve the minutes as presented from March 10th.
Second.
Okay, Commissioner Whalen had a motion seconded by Commissioner Kimball. We'll go ahead and call for a vote.
Stevenson,
Yes.
Hampi,
Yes.
Carey,
Yes.
Kimball,
Yes.
Whalen,
Yes.
Davis.
Yes. Next item on the agenda this evening is citizen issues. This section is reserved for citizens who wish to address the commission on issues that are not on the agenda this evening, nor plan to be on any future agendas. If you do have something to cover that will be coming up, we ask for you to hold it until then. Do we have any citizen issues at this time?
None.
Okay, none, then we'll go ahead and move on. Mr. Manley, correct me if I'm wrong, we do not have any unfinished and or old business, correct?
That is correct.
So we will move on to the main portion of this evening, and that is our public hearing. First and only public hearing is the vintage acquisition annexation, and I will go ahead and turn it over after it's open to Mr. Manley to present.
Right, can everybody see the slideshow?
Yes.
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 All right. So, good evening, Chairman Davis and Commissioners. John Manley, Planning Manager at the City of Post Falls, introducing the Vintage Annexation and Wrenley Estates Subdivision, file numbers ANNX1 2020, and for the subdivision, the SUBD 7 2020. The owners are Chubbs LLC, and the applicant is Lake City Engineering, which is representing the owner tonight. I do want to go into, before I go to present, there's actually going to be two separate motions in conclusion. One regarding the annexation, where you'll be recommending the zoning aspect to City Council for the ultimate determination on whether or not this property is annexed or not at a later date. And then as part of the subdivision, you will be making a conditioned approval upon annexation or denial of it as part of your motion. So I'll reiterate it at the end of this as well. So the annexation is being requested is for about 9.77 acres, and they're requesting single family residential R1 zoning for this property. The subdivision that's being requested is for the same area of land, and it's and it could be represented in Exhibit A3, details that in your staff report. And I'll present it within this presentation as well. So the location of the proposed project is, as you see here, it's a bit northeast of the intersection of Pole Line Avenue and the Greens Ferry Road. It is about just under 700 feet east of Greens Ferry Road on Bogey Drive. It currently is labeled Wheelbarrow Lane, but it's being renamed to Bogey Drive. Currently, there's a large lot residential home on this in Kootenai County, and there's no known topography or vegetation issues on this site. When we're looking at annexation proposals, the first aspect is to look at, is the zoning request appropriate, and making that recommendation to City Council. So we go through the zone change review criteria to find out if the requests are in balance with certain criteria. So what I have here is the first three. There's 6 criteria, and I'll go through the first 3. Consistent with the future land use map. Is it consistent with goals and policies found in the comprehensive plan? Is the zoning assigned in consideration of street classifications, traffic patterns, existing development, future land uses, community plans, and geographic or natural features? So looking at the staff report, there was a discussion on whether or not it was consistent with the street classification and traffic patterns. You can see that Bogey Drive is classified as a minor collector, and that's located on the northern boundary, which is also cited in the introduction. And Bogey Drive provides access to minor arterial and major collector roadway is located to the east and west. The proposed zoning on this is also consistent with the transportation master plan of this area. Looking at the existing development in the area, primarily what you see in the city is other single-family homes, and you have other large lot lands in Kootenai County, of which the proposal would be consistent with. For future land uses, I'll go into the future land use map here in just a little bit, but you can see how this would be consistent with that as a designated residential. So some of the goals and policies that are in the plan is the densities and the uses provide walking distance and transportation nodes. The mixed use, that would be overall policy one, where they're trying to create walkable neighborhoods to amenities nearby. The staff report cites that Greens Ferry Elementary, Pleasant View Elementary, and Post Falls High School are all within walking distance of this site. Also, some of the policies are to encourage land uses to remain a desirable, stable, and sustainable community. Post Falls has historically done this through its R1 zoning district by providing a diverse range of housing types and price levels for the community. Another one, residential policy, that would be residential policy 2, is look for a range of housing prices. And you can see this in the R1 zoning district of some large degree of variability in housing prices. Some of the houses, recently have been even on the lower end and fairly more on the expensive range. And that's where in the future, and you can see where diversity in housing products helps provide that diverse price point for residents in Post Falls. And this is where the zoning map comes in, looking at the use is compatible with the existing development. You can see the large degree of R1 in the city, and the white that would be in the county. To the southwest of here, you can see that limited commercial and that policy that discussed that independence and that walkable to amenities. That limited commercial and off to the east may provide some neighborhood commercial that would then once again meet that policy point and enhance that policy point with this request. And here's where that mentioned future land use designation, where you see the residential in yellow. What they're asking is consistent with the future land use map. The last three criteria that you see here is dealing with commercial. The fourth one, commercial and high density residential zoning is typically assigned along streets with higher road classification. Well, they're not asking for either one of those, so this wouldn't be applicable to their request. The fifth one, limited or neighborhood commercial and lower density residential zoning is typically assigned for properties as they proceed further away from higher intense urban activities. So where we see our intense urban activity areas are along some corridors. You have 41 that's off to the east. You got Celtice Way in the downtown area to the south. And this is significantly further away from those areas. And so this would be an appropriate location for the proposal and would meet this criteria point. The sixth one is dealing with industrial zoning, and they're not requesting that, so that wouldn't be applicable either. So that kind of wraps up the analysis that you found mostly in the staff report dealing with the annexation aspect of it. Do you guys have any questions for me at this point before we proceed into discussing the subdivision plan and that criteria for that?
John, I got a quick question. And going back to the overall map, is that now an island?
Are you looking at the map that I show up here?
Yeah.
It's an island that is decreasing in size quite a bit. We have to the north, what's called Kildare Lane along the north side that's seeing some development. We also have other developments within this. It's shrinking this island. Well, it will eventually be an actual technical island because we've approved annexation to encompass this. And so it was a finger, but yeah, this is an infill area that's seeing pressure.
Okay, so it is infill now.
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Chairman, this is Laura. John, I noticed when I was able to, through Kootenai County, look at the 9.77 acres, that there's a home on it. Can you tell us about that landowner and have they already, they're gone, or what's the story there?
Well, I'll speak to what I know at this point. I know the applicant can probably, when it's their turn, talk to that in further details. But I drove out there actually today one more time just to look at the existing conditions of that site. So to me, it does not look like anybody's residing at that residence. Is at the northwest corner of this 9.77 acres. So it's, you can see the hand that I have on the screen here, it's right about that location.
So, Mr. Manley, I'll make a note of it and we can have Mr. Dippin maybe address that.
Perfect.
Any other questions for staff at this time?
I would have a question for Commission Member Whalen, if I might, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
So, Ms. Commissioner, Commissioner Whalen, she did some research on the county's website to look at the property. Just so the record is clear, did she do any other research prior to the meeting this evening?
No, sir. I just, it would be really helpful if we had the parcel number, and I shared that with the chairman. I looked via the tracks and was able to locate it. I didn't do a drive-by, but certainly wanted to be informed prior to the meeting.
Yeah, Mr. Cafferty, I was going to bring that up to you. Is that as far as having parcel and having information on there, where does that stand? Are we okay with that or no?
Right now, excuse me, right now it's been disclosed, and so we know what she has looked at. That's kind of like ex parte communication. We're supposed to limit it to what's in the staff report and what's in the record. Okay. It's kind of counterintuitive because I totally understand and appreciate Ms. Whalen's desire to be abreast of the situation and make herself available for all the facts that are out there. But in land use matters, just like a judge, we don't get to go out and do our own research. We have to ask staff to bring that so that the applicant, and in this case, any public that's there, has the opportunity to know what we looked at and to make sure that we looked at the right piece of property and things like that. So there's some Supreme Court cases that have frowned upon such action, but I think we're okay today.
Perfect, duly noted. If we have no other questions for Mr. Manley, then I would go ahead and turn it over to the applicant. I believe Mr. Dittman is presenting this evening.
I think I need to wrap up the staff report for the subdivision aspect. Then at that point, conclude staff's role in this hearing.
That's correct. We do have two parts. So Mr. Manley, why don't you move into the subdivision plan at this time?
So at this location, as you see, here's the proposed subdivision. You see here, I highlighted in red the 9.77 acres, the proposed number of lots of 35 that resulted in a density of 3.582 dwelling units per acre. It's assumed that potentially, if this was R1, this would work with the minimum lot size of 7632, which would meet the minimum lot size for an R1, which is 6,500 square feet. The maximum lot size you see in the proposal was about 17,000 square feet with an average of 12,000. So there kind of gives the dynamics of the proposal from that matrix. Here's that house on the northwest corner that you see here. Actually, I'll show a slide later on. Staff does recommend an additional condition that I have discussed with the applicant on this, but you can see here's the house. It faces Bogey Drive, and you can see the internal road network that they plan on doing with this proposal. It provides connectivity to the west for additional infill or development to the west, to the south that connects to an existing street for connectivity, and as well as an access up to Bogey Drive. There's a summary of what I just discussed. The water provider, though, is Ross Point Water District, which saw the will serve letter in the staff report, and the sewer would be provided by the city of Post Falls. So going into that criteria is we look for whether or not there's definite provisions on for water supply and the adequate quantity, quality, and for the type of subdivision being proposed. You can look at Ross Point Water District. They provide a will serve letter, so that would then meet that criteria. We'd be looking at other adequate provisions to have been made for public sewage system that the existing municipal system can accommodate in the proposed sewer flows. In the staff report, you can see that Post Falls has adequate capacity to provide the subdivision as proposed, and the layout of the sanitary sewer system is adequate to serve the proposed lots. Also, the sanitary sewer will need to be extended on Bogey Drive to the project's eastern boundary as part of the to and through requirements. That's how Post Falls facilitates development. Is with development, you get to and through, and that allows the adjoining parcels then to develop and provide those improvements for Post Falls. The existing house, if it was to remain, will be required to connect the sanitary sewer with construction of the subdivision, and the existing septic tank would be abandoned in conformance with Panhandle health requirements. The third is the proposed streets are consistent with the transportation master plan. And as you've seen here, or saw in your staff report, is that the proposed layout accommodates connectivity to the existing subdivision and future land development to the west. I kind of went over that in the overview. And the roadways shall dedicate right-of-way and easements and can be constructed with the roadway standards as outlined in the transportation master plan. The fourth criteria is all the areas of the proposed subdivision which may involve soil or topographical conditions presenting hazards have been identified, and that the proposed uses of these areas are compatible with such conditions. And so there were no hazards found within the analysis of this proposal. The fifth criteria is the area proposed for the subdivision is zoned for the proposed use, and the use conforms to the other requirements found in this code. So caveat that with that this will be conditioned upon approval with the R1 zoning if that was recommended, and then at such time that then would meet this criteria that's being as part of this set for subdivision reviews. If for some reason council went a different direction with it, then their proposal may or may not fit this criteria, which then would request some sort of, it would be some amendment to the subdivision of sorts down the road if something went awry at city council. Like for example, well, who knows? So the subdivision review criteria 6.1 deals with the developer having adequate plans to ensure the community will bear no more than its fair share of cost. This one right here, as you see at the end, is for about impact fees, and that's for police, health, safety, streets, and parks. So that's what the residential development contributes as far as paying their impact of growth against those three tiers. And once again, that's health and safety, parks, and streets. Here's that proposed additional condition that staff is recommending, is that lot 1 shall only construct a 3-foot fence on the northerly property line adjacent to Bogey Drive and easterly property line adjacent to Wrenley, unless otherwise approved by the zoning administrator. So here's how you see it. So those are the front setbacks. So depending on how they configure this house, they may or may not be able to make modifications to that. Right now, the front door faces Bogey, and it's a side entry house that comes in on the proposed Wrenley Avenue. And so that's just to help mitigate the potential of a 6-foot fence being built around the entire house, blocking visibility and potential access to that front door. Here's the agencies that were routed. Of them, Kootenai County Fire, they remain neutral on the proposal. Once again, here's the proposed layout. Do you have any questions for me at this point with what's presented on the subdivision? Or I can go back to the annexation too if there's additional requests.
I have one question. With regards to that additional condition for the fence, is there something in our subdivision ordinance that requires that there to be a fence, or is that more of a zoning requirement that the fence can't be a certain height in the front yard?
Well, the zoning in Title 18, it does require that 3-foot fences are only allowed in the front of the property. What I found though on these pre-existing houses, what ends up happening is by the time staff realizes about this 3-foot fence or a violation of the 3-foot fence, it's a little late because they go in, the subdivision, the construction team goes in, they build the road. They want to have a fence that surrounds their subdivision for their own design. We get our residential permit for either a modification to a house or a new house. We go out there and they've installed a 6-foot fence, but then by then the person who's bought the house, the pre-existing house, is kind of attached to the 6-foot fence that shouldn't have been constructed. That kind of counters code, and it creates a compromising position where you have the zoning saying that it needs to be a 3-foot, but then there ends up being some subjectivity of what's really the front door. So what this does is it catches it hopefully earlier in the process at the time of subdivision approval. So it's clear, so when someone's doing the construction and it gets tied into it, that hopefully then it makes it cleaner on the developer and staff down the road, even though it technically is also addressed in the Title 18.
I thought we were only allowed to condition to make it, or add a condition to make a subdivision compliant with subdivision code, and that other code sections had to stand on their own. Is that wrong, Mr. Cafferty, maybe?
This condition would allow the subdivision to comply with the zoning requirement. And so otherwise the subdivision wouldn't be able to be approved because it wouldn't meet the standard for the zoning. And so this clarifies some potential confusion as to what's allowed in the zoning. So it's not a zoning requirement, it's a subdivision requirement to ensure compliance with the zoning, which is a decision criteria for approval of the subdivision. Does that make sense, or is that really lawyer circular talk for you?
That made a lot of sense to me. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
question for John. Can you put your hand on where the green space, where the parks that you spoke of are?
The parks that I spoke of dealt with, I'll go back to the subdivision plan. This proposal isn't proposing a park. What they do as part of their, the criteria 6, their impact on the community, they pay an impact fee that is appropriated to help create park space down the road, so that way their impact is mitigated through that proportionate share of that impact fee for parks. But they're not providing, we don't currently require parks as part of subdivision development. It's dealt with through the impact fee.
So the city uses those collected impact fees to acquire park property in other places. Is that what you're saying, Mr. Manley?
Yes, that would be correct. We have a level of service map in our comprehensive plan that looks at need areas and where our needs are met. And Parks Department uses these collected funds through impact fees to purchase and develop parks, more of the regional type or a citywide need within areas of demand.
And then the only other question I have is regarding the existing house. And you say it's served by septic, obviously. And they'll be required to connect to city sewer. So has there been communication with them about that, or how does that roll out?
I believe we'll probably throw that one out to Mr. Dittman when he gets up. Is that correct?
That would be correct.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Manley staff while we are here? Annexation, subdivision, either one? Okay.
Once again, I would like to remind you at the end of this, there is 2 separate motions, one to deal with the annexation and then one for the subdivision. And preferably make the motion on the annexation, but prior to the subdivision.
Absolutely. Okay. Mr. Manley, thank you. I believe at this time we will turn things over to Mr. Dittman.
Good evening, Chairman Davis, fellow commissioners. I presume everybody can hear me okay.
Correct.
Drew Dittman, Lake City Engineering, for the record, 126 East Poplar Avenue in the city of Coeur d'Alene. representing tonight the Vintage Acquisition folks and Chubb's LLC. As John had indicated, we have both an annexation and a subdivision in front of you. I have shared my screen, and I'm assuming that everybody can see this.
Yes.
So this is a snippet that I took from the county's website today, showing the subject parcel in the middle here where my hand is. And everything that is highlighted in green is currently annexed into the city limits. Very similar to the map that John had showed up. We're looking to annex approximately 10 acres. It's 9.77 to be precise. Surrounded by city property to the south and to the west. As Commissioner Kimball had stated, it is in that island that sits between Greens Ferry, Cecil, and Poline and Prairie that is slowly but surely filling in with residential. That whole entire area, as John had indicated, is residential on the future land use map and is slowly but surely being annexed and developed accordingly as it should. I'm going to be a bit brief and I think go for a little bit of an assumptive close because it is an infill property. We are asking for a residential zoning designation, which is in conformance with the comp plan and all of the city master plan documents. Again, John has indicated we're asking for R1 zoning. It's surrounded on the west and south and even over to the east in the Tullamore property there by R1 property. So it fits with that. John had gone through the zone change criteria items 1 through 6 in his presentation, so I won't go through that. He'd also gone through an annexation analysis, and we had submitted a full comprehensive plan analysis as well as part of the package. So you guys have that information in front of you, so I won't go through that. As the subdivision is concerned, this is the same map that John had showed. We have Bogey Drive here to the north and the existing vineyard subdivision to the south. You can see this layout. We have actually been working on this project for 6 or 7 months now and gone through several renditions of the subdivision plan with city staff trying to solve some connectivity issues, some sewer issues, et cetera. And this is ultimately the layout that we had agreed upon with staff that does provide connectivity north to south and east to west that staff was looking for to make the adjoining properties work in the future. So we have 35 lots proposed on about 9.8 acres. It's a density of about 3.6 units to the acre. The R1 allows 5 units to the acre, so we're within that. Our average lot size, it says 12,000 here, but I think that's wrong. I think I calculated it earlier at about 8,500, so I'm not sure where that number came from. But still over that 6,500 square foot minimum as required by the R1 zone. All of the lots that we've got shown here are in conformance with the requested R1 zoning. A little bit of history, and maybe this will answer Commissioner Whalen's comments or questions about the existing house. When we submitted this back in late January, early February, I don't remember, the property was still owned by Vintage Acquisitions, and that's why the annexation is entitled Vintage Acquisition. Subsequently, the property was purchased by Chubb's LLC, and that's why the subdivision was presented under Chubb's LLC. So my client currently owns that existing house that is there. It is currently vacant and is subject to be remodeled. And we will be keeping the house, as John had said. We've designed that lot 1 there to accommodate the existing house and to work with the street. The garage currently does face to the east, so it will front off of the new Wrenley lane, but the front of the house will still front Bogey Drive, as John had indicated. And I understand John's concerns about the fence and the 3 foot and the added condition. I believe it's number 11 that he added, and we're okay with that. I understand where he's coming from on that, and that certainly makes sense to us, so I don't see any issues there. There are 10 other conditions that are proposed in the staff report. I've reviewed those with my client, and we don't take exception to any of them. So again, I said I would be brief because it's an infill project, and I think it's a good fit, and it's a good quality project, and I would stand for any questions.
I think Any questions for Mr. Dittman at this time?
Yeah, I have one.
Commissioner Stephenson, go ahead.
Obviously the road here, Bogey, is going to be complete, but between this lot and Greens Ferry, is Bogey complete there too?
So between this point right here, if you can see my cursor in my hand, and Greens Ferry, which is over here, that was completed with the Jacobs Run subdivision. However, there's a little gap of property that I'm trying to circle right here that you can see that was not completed. We have discussed that with the engineering staff, and I think Rob's online, he could attest to that, but we are going to be required to pave that section and provide the connectivity from the new street to the old street. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Mr. Paulus, anything to add with that, sir?
No, Mr. Dittman had things summarized correctly from our previous discussions.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Dittman? Okay, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Public comment, Amber, do we have any for the project?
None.
Do we have any neutral?
None.
Do we have any against?
None.
Okay, seeing none, then there would be no need for Mr. Dittman to come back to us. So I, at this time, would ask the commissioners, do we have any other questions, comments, or needs of information before we go ahead and close this out? Okay, seeing none, then we will go ahead and close the public hearing, and I will open it up for commissioner comments, thoughts, or concerns. Mr. Kimball, you happen to be right there. Do you want to start?
Sure. I'll start on the annexation. So from an annexation perspective, this seems like it's an island. So 100% makes sense to annex it. Infill projects should get and are supposed to get priority. So I think that is a fantastic thing. The comprehensive plan says it should be residential. Single family R1 residential meets that criteria, as well as all of the, and is very similar to the surrounding zonings. Water, sewers there, it's adjacent to the city, it meets all those, pretty much all the criteria for annexation, and R1 is probably the best zone for that parcel. Definitely in support of that. Subdivision wise, given an R1 zoning, and as conditioned, it would meet all the criteria for subdivision. Water's there, sewers there, transportation is being taken care of. James, great catch on that, on the little gap in the road. That was really good. And that makes it so that there's great connectivity each direction, paved in and out. So yeah, from that standpoint, I think everything makes a lot of sense, meets criteria, and I haven't heard anything that otherwise.
Commissioner Hampy, we cannot see you, but we can hear you. Anything to add, thoughts?
No, I think that Mr. Kimball said it all. I completely agree.
Thank you, Joe Carey.
Yeah, I agree too. I think it'd be a great just infill right there to fill that in. I do have a quick question, and I don't know if it's past time I should have asked this, but on that little connectivity there, does that need to be in here somewhere, or is that just done in the department?
Mr. Cafferty, does it give us the ability to ask that question, or has our time elapsed for that?
You have taken testimony. It might be a clarification of the process that the city uses, because honestly, I don't know how that works. So maybe one of the conditions that has been proposed as well. Maybe Drew has something to say. Maybe Mr. Paulus can clarify that for us.
Mr. Chair, Robert Paulus, Assistant City Engineer. Just to clarify that when we get into the design review and construction, since they have to connect to the sanitary sewer on the far, what from this project would be the west end of that gap, when they bring that sewer across, that's when we would have them in restoring that roadway, put the roadway section back in place at that time. And that would be the asphalt to make that connectivity. It's a very short little piece.
Okay. Thank
Okay.
you.
Commissioner Whalen, any thoughts?
I thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think Commissioner Kimball said it quite eloquently, and I concur.
Very nice. And lastly, Commissioner, I almost skipped over you, Mr. Stephenson. I apologize. Do you have anything else to add?
No, I think it totally makes sense. It's a good infill. R1 makes sense in that area. So I agree with that and everything else everyone else said.
And James, I echo what Ray said. Good catch on that. Good job. So at this point, we would be looking for a motion of either approval or denial of the annexation first, and secondly, looking for the subdivision piece. So I would entertain a motion specifically for annexation at this time. Is that correct? It's not correct.
It's not correct. Your
Mr. Cafferty, go
recommendation
ahead.
would be for the zoning on the property should it be annexed. So your recommendation is on the zoning portion of it.
Okay, so I would move in, all right, I gotta find the case number here. Annexation ANNX-0001-2020, the Vintage Acquisitions Annexation. I would move that we recommend approval of an R1 zoning, finding that it meets the applicable criteria set forth in our code and the comprehensive plan.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Have a motion and second. Roll call vote.
Hampi,
She's on mute.
Hampi,
Commissioner Hampy, I believe you're
Yes,
on.
yes, I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Perfect.
Whalen,
Yes.
Kimball,
Yes.
Carey,
Yes.
Stephenson,
Yes.
Davis.
Yes. So we have approval of zoning. So at this point, Mr. Cafferty, correct me again if I'm wrong, but now we move on to annexation. Looking for a motion there.
I believe we're looking for a subdivision.
Yes, subdivision.
And I would move to recommend or to approve Wrenley Estates subdivision file SUBD-0007-2020. Adopting findings on the staff report, as well as conditions 1 through 10 in the staff report, adding condition 11 as presented by Mr. Manley in his presentation, finding that it does meet all of the criteria for subdivision, assuming an R1 zoning is given to property.
As motion, looking for a second.
A second.
Motion and a second, call for a vote.
Stephenson,
Yes.
Carey,
Yes.
Kimball,
Yes.
Hampi,
Yes.
Whalen,
Yes.
Davis.
Yes. All right. We will move that on to City Council. That finishes the public hearings for this evening, which takes us to new business. Mr. Manley, do we have any new business this evening?
There is none.
Wonderful. Administrative and or staff reports from anyone.
Staff has none.
Okay. Commissioner comments, anything for the good of the order?
This is great.
Yes, and yes.
Yes, it's,
Yeah, we're getting through it. If there is no comments, then in a second I will move for adjournment. I do appreciate everyone's willingness to hop on and in unique times, working very diligently to continue business as usual. So thanks for the staff for putting this whole thing together. And I would look for a motion to adjourn at this time.
Are you, as the Planning and Zoning Commission, aware? I think we're going to have 2 meetings this month. Are you guys, where we're going to see you in 2 weeks?
Yes, and I believe at that time, based on Commissioner Whalen's manual that she was going through, that we will still be doing that via Zoom, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So yes.
That's the day after Memorial Day, right?
We'll still be in stage 3.
Okay. So I believe that we will have another set of Zoom invites, passwords, and things of that nature. Mr. Cafferty, anything else to add?
No, Mr. Chairman, I apologize for stealing your thunder so you guys can get out of here.
No, by no means.
Where do we have to go?
yeah, really. We can't go anywhere.
All right. I look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Adjourn?
Everyone be safe. Have a wonderful evening.
Bye.
Bye.